design and filled with a mix of photography and illustration, this is a book any writer will cherish for years to come. And now I'm going to hand this over to Peter.
Hi, thanks for the lovely intro, and nice to talk with everyone. I've ridden in Colorado many times doing like urban riding and road biking and mountain biking, and one of my favorite states to ride in, and just appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about this book, which is really something I spent years thinking about what it is, answering this question, why do people ride? That's really like what started me on this journey of like thinking about this book. Before I get into the premise of the book, maybe if folks want to know a little bit about me, I guess important things might be that I'm a lifelong rider. I began to ride as a child and just sort of instantly fell in love, and have just been riding now for 50 something years. Along the way, I became a journalist and a writer, and have written about bike related things for now about 30 years. Here's some photos that some of which are pretty old. There's a photo of me biking cross country in 1992, getting an autograph from legendary American racer Greg LeMond in San Francisco. On the far left, getting measured by legendary bike builder Dario Pegoretti. Among other things, I was editor-in-chief of Bicycling Magazine, which is the largest bike magazine in the world. And I left that job about 10 years ago and moved to Los Angeles, and have in that transition, had to think about how I fit into bike culture and how my riding life has changed. And I think a lot of people who are passionate about riding and have done it for a long time see how the kind of riding they do changes, and their relationship to the activity changes, and all that really influenced me to write this book. And so I guess if I were to like jump to the premise of the book, historically in bike culture, there's been this feeling that there are these things called like bike tribes, that everybody like fits into a subculture. Maybe you're a mountain biker, or you're a commuter, or you're a real fitness oriented road rider. And there was this perception of just these subcultures being these distinct spaces, and also the sense that the bike culture was this like pyramid where you if you were serious about it, it was like judo, where you were like trying to move from a white belt to a yellow belt, or to hoping to become a black belt. And for me, like leaving a big bike magazine and moving to LA, and suddenly having most of my bike life revolve around commuting to the office, I really got to thinking about all this connective tissue between everybody who rides. And so this book is really an exploration of this hypothesis that everyone who rides, no matter what kind of riding they do or what kind of clothes they wear when they ride, is just way more interconnected than they might realize. And so it's like a celebration of this connectivity and inclusion within biking culture. And as the introduction mentioned, I, after thinking about it for like a year, came up with 6 chapters that are all these like big ideas of what almost everyone who rides loves about riding. And so, they are adventure, speed, utility, nature, competition, and self-expression. So I'll just maybe spend a minute or two on each of those to kind of explain what I mean and what the beauty and the connectivity in those ideas and areas are. Adventure is one for me that, and like a lot of these chapter topics, to me, like link back to my childhood of like when I first fell in love with riding and these things that have stayed with me. Like as a kid, it started with this idea that this bike gave me this freedom to explore. Initially it was just my neighborhood, and I could, push out a little further and have this sense of discovery. And as I grew older, the terrain expanded. And it still stays with me today, this feeling of you go out on a ride and unexpected things happen, and you get to disconnect from all our lives are so digital these days. Like a lot of us spend so much of our time tethered to devices that for me, getting on a bike is a chance to just go out and be present in the moment and be outside and have unexpected things happen. In bike culture, you're seeing a great amount of interest in things like bike packing, and gravel riding and mountain biking. I certainly, for me, like riding cross country was probably the biggest adventure on a bike in my life. But even in a big city like LA, I find adventure every day on my bike. And I think that most people who ride, even if you're just like on a heavy, sturdy urban bike riding for coffee, get this idea of like when you're on a bike, you're participating in this drama. Like I find that when you drive a car, it can feel like you're watching a show on TV. And when you're riding a bike, it's like you're in the show. So I think everyone can relate to this idea of adventure. Speed is the next idea. And speed to me is about a feeling, right? It's when I was a kid and I got that experience of just riding a bike down this little hill to where my elementary school was, and the joy I felt doing that is something that has stayed with me. There's just something magical about the feeling of being on a bike. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're a serious racer or just a casual rider, that the sensations of being on a bike and moving and feeling the wind in your hair is this beautiful thing that is narcotic for a lot of people who ride. And I just, if you're curious, that's another photo of Greg LeMond, who is a legendary bike racer, but also has become someone who's developed e-bikes, which are increasingly popular. I know there's been a lot of great stories coming out of Colorado about the support of e-bikes, and it's something that's can be like a gateway drug for a lot of people who maybe have never or not since childhood had this feeling of being on a well-made bike that moves pretty fast and experiencing that joyful feeling. So yeah, speed has, in this case, isn't really about racing. It's about the feeling of moving. Utility is one that I think is super topical these days, that the biggest growth in riding in the US is in cities, and people have just discovered that the bike is an incredibly smart and fun way to get around, that there's all these problems our culture is facing, whether it's concerns about climate change or just the crushing traffic and headaches of getting around in a car, about people's struggle to find time for themselves or to get some physical activity, to feel connected to the communities they live in. And the bike is the answer to so many of these questions. And I think if you just go to like a local coffee shop and just see all manners of bikes parked out front and all sorts of people who ride there, you can really feel like something transformational is happening. I know in a lot of like communities within bike culture that like in the past just looked at riding as like a fitness activity or like a hobby, have increasingly started using their bikes to just go to shopping or somewhere in their community, or to get to work, or to visit friends. This is something that interconnects a lot of people who ride, of just like using it as transportation, and it's a beautiful thing. Nature is the next topic that I wrote a chapter about, and this is just about like finding peace and connection to the outdoors. And like a lot of people, certainly in Colorado, the access to the outdoors is amazing, and you can go to these like truly amazing wilderness areas. But this is also a feeling you can get from being on a tree-lined street or on a path in a park. It's not really dependent on you being an extraordinary athlete who's willing to spend all day riding. It's about just being connected to the outdoors, and being connected even to just our ability to be out in different weather conditions, and to just be present in the environment. And I think whether you ride on pavement or dirt or gravel, it doesn't matter that you're in an environment where you can, hear birds chirp and smell grass, or get wet in a summer thunderstorm. That this feeling of like being present in the outdoors. And there is like trends going on where increasingly people that used to just ride on pavement are looking to be in wilder places. And this is also a beautiful thing that I'm sure is popular with a lot of people in Colorado, of just like getting out into a space where you're just completely surrounded by the outdoors. And that is a beautiful thing. The next one is competition. And I guess with this one, the important thing to say is that there's some like bike racing looking images. And this is really, for most people, not about trying to win something or try and beat somebody. But I think a bicycle winds up for a lot of people being this thing where you can like challenge and test yourself, right? That we're physical beings, and even if you're just commuting to the office, you get this feeling of like what you're capable and wanting to test it. That one of the sort of most enjoyable ways to enjoy a bike is to go out riding with a group of people. And even when you're not racing, there's this feeling of like testing what you're capable of, and feeling this really profound happiness about challenging yourself physically and feeling good about your effort. There is a photo on the bottom left of someone using Zwift, and there have been a bunch of digital innovations in the last decade where with apps like Strava and Zwift, where people can get a taste of testing themselves and competing without being in anything like a race. And I do think this connects people more than they realize of just like we're physical creatures and wanting to and that satisfaction of like seeing what you're capable of it can be quite profound. The last chapter in the book is self-expression, and this is, I think, the most complicated idea in the book. And I honestly had this as two chapters that I wound up combining because self-expression really like covers a range of things. It's like in some regard, it's just about us being able to escape conformity, a kind of conformity that maybe used to be a big piece of bike culture, meaning you could just like, you can wear what you want on a bike, that brands that have taken cues from fashion have gotten into bike culture. You instead of buying a bike made at a factory in Asia by a huge brand, you can get an artisan to build you a bike, like, sort of the impact of like Etsy kind of culture into it. And there's all sorts of ways in which I think as an individual, people have realized that some essential piece of who they are can be reflected through how they participate in riding. And I think that like the deeper thing that emerges from that that's really important is this feeling of acceptance and tolerance, where people in bike culture have realized that that you can be who you want to be on a bike. You can it's not like there's a uniform culture that you have to conform to, and therefore there's more of a feeling of acceptance and tolerance for people that are different than you, and that bike culture is better if everybody is expressing who they are and feels welcome. And as was mentioned in the intro, there's a lot of profiles and mini profiles in the book, people I've known for a long time in bike culture. And I really tried hard to interview a range of people that like show that kind of self-expression and tolerance, that it certainly there is just so much more influence overall by riders who are women and people of color and people who don't fit the old stereotypes of like what an expert bike rider is or was. And this is all just for the better, and feel like very hopeful that people who read the book see all these different kinds of people and these different faces and different kinds of bikes, and realize that we're a part of something big. And that I would note that one thing that unifies almost everyone who rides is concerns about safety, particularly on the road, and that just to state the obvious, that the bigger the community of bike culture is and the more interconnected we are, the more power we have collectively for change to make riding safer. And so I feel like there's a lot of positivity to be gained from this sort of interconnectivity within bike culture. That there's one saying that I think I coined maybe 10 years ago, that's sort of my mantra is, if you're riding a bike, you're doing it right. And that like in the past, there was this feeling that maybe there were only a couple ways to do it right. There was like a proper way to dress and a proper way to do everything. And now I think I get the sense that it's time where, however each individual wants to participate, that they're a part of something big and interconnected and beautiful. So Yeah, I think that's like a good introduction to the idea, and I'll stop blabbing for now.
Thank you, Peter. That was great. I wanted to actually just kind of open this up to everyone. I have a few questions, but if people want to raise their hand or put their questions in the chat, that would be great, and we could kind of go from there. I um, was really, I guess, inspired becoming as being a someone new to cycling and kind of, I don't know, coming along with this e-bike trend as well. It just by all your stories and like you said, the diversity and the interconnectivitous of bringing different people, different riders in and some new things as well. But I also really liked all of your stories, and one in particular, or not one in particular, but one that really kind of just caught me was your 1992 cross country trip from Seattle to New York with your best friend. And I really kind of like the story of being the encounter with a guy with a shotgun. And if you just wanted to talk about that a little bit, and if you had any other like situations that you dealt with that you would like to share.
Sure. So yeah, I when I was 25 with my best friend, we quit our jobs, which at 25 is quite easy to do, and rode from Seattle to New York, and it was yeah, it was probably like the most beautiful thing I've ever done. Mostly just because I was in the moment as much as I'll ever be in my life, where we just got up every day and rode, and we had no goal sketched out of like how far we would go or where we would sleep or where we would eat or who we would talk to, and just the whole time was just um, like a million random conversations with people in small towns. The story you mentioned, we were about a week into the trip, and we were in the Eastern Cascades near this town called Wakanda, that's like halfway up a giant mountain pass. And either Dave or I can't even remember, broke a spoke, which in those days was somewhat common, and we had to fix it. And it was getting kind of late, so we were like, all right, we're just going to like throw up a tent in a pasture and sleep here for the night. And and we did that, and it was just about sunset, and some guy hobbling with a cane showed up with a shotgun and was not happy we were camping on his property. But it turned out that he had some problems with horse rustlers, and once he determined that we were just young bike tours and not folks looking to steal his horses, he invited us in and made us like Irish coffee and talked to us about his experiences as a Vietnam veteran. And I think, yeah, like as part of adventure, it's like obviously like no one wants to end a day with someone brandishing a shotgun, but I think it's more like our lives can feel so predictable sometimes, and that just in general, being on a bike ride, especially one that's longer, just these spontaneous things happen, and it's hard to feel more alive than in those moments. And so yeah, there are like so many moments from that trip that I'll never forget. And I could definitely tell stories about that probably to fill this whole call. But I think that like the thing is I ride back and forth from my house to my office every day, and almost every time I just have like some interaction, and just like you're transported in a way that I think most people crave in their lives.
You also mentioned that you would like to do another tour like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean, my kids are older now, and I'm actually thinking in August that I might do a week-long tour. And man, I think I'm too old to sleep on the ground anymore. So I'm trying to think of like some place where where I could just ride and go from like hotel to hotel, but have like no set plan and just bring like one change of clothes and a credit card and just like, I don't know, like maybe ride from Kansas City to St. Louis and just wing it. Um, and I think, yeah, I definitely have been I've been doing a lot of these like really long all day rides around Southern California lately, where I just like look at someplace where I can take a train back towards home and just ride all day and go on roads that are unfamiliar. And I find that to be, yeah, really satisfying at this point in my life.
Thank you. Anyone have any comments or any questions or any bike tours that they've done that they'd like to share?
I see somebody just asked, do I ride with my kids? My sons now are 17 and 19. And so if you're a parent of kids that age, just to do anything with your kids is magical. And I do not do a lot of riding with my kids, or for that matter, my wife. But when they were growing up, we rode a ton. And my older son, actually, who's home from his freshman year of college, is like working as a counselor at a camp that teaches young kids how to ride here in LA. And it definitely swells me with like this happy, warm feeling that my son is like teaching elementary school age kids how to ride a bike. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I guess I do more riding alone than I used to. But I'm hopeful that my kids, when they get a little older, will want to join me again.
Nice, nice. Well, at the end of each section, as I mentioned, there's a spotlight on riders or what you call unifiers. And I was just wondering if any that really stand out. Another question I also had was, did you ride with all of them or did you just interview them? I know
I've
you mentioned
Yeah,
you.
I've ridden with I'd say most of them, but not all of them. And yeah, I mean the people that are profiled in the book are collectively really important to me, and it's really hard to single out individuals like Marley Blonsky is in the book because she's become an advocate for heavy riders. She always will just say fat riders, and I'm like a little bit more squeamish about it. But this idea that bike culture has evolved to the point where someone is an advocate for fat riders, and there's just big brands have gotten her involved as a diplomat, and this idea just in general that people from different communities belong to bike culture. And there are professional bike racers who've gotten involved in safety advocacy, which is a beautiful thing. There are people who have like brought more Black riders into the culture, which is really a beautiful thing. Um, yeah, they're all people that have just like stepped outside of those subcultures and like added texture to this bigger thing we participate in. Uh, the only person I don't know is Miss Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, who has done an amazing job transforming what used to be a really car centric city into a city that's just radically different by welcoming bikes. But everybody else in the book is someone I know personally, and I have ridden with most of them. Some of them can totally kick my butt, which is fine.
So we have Phil in the chat, and he said, thanks for mentioning Paris Mayor and Hidalgo. I look forward to hearing what the rest of the world thinks during the Olympics now that it is in Paris or will be soon, and also about the 15-minute city.
Yeah, that's, I mean, for folks that haven't been to Paris in the last 5, 7 years, or if you've never been there, it it's so inspiring and also so frustrating that if you ride a bike and live in the US, right? If you live in the US, you're just so used to just proposing a modest bike lane can turn into like a world war in many cities where just even nominal change to make the activity safer is really creates a lot of friction. But in Paris, they have just transformed the streetscape where a huge amount of people get around on a bike and just whether you're driving or walking or taking transit or riding a bike in Paris, it's just become more pleasant and less noisy and less polluted. And so it's hopefully to me an inspiring thing for people who ride to imagine what our cities could look like in the future based on the courage and leadership she's shown.
Well, we have another question in the chat, but I also had a question that that's along those lines. So in the 60s, the Childs, they created the Citizens Bicycle Study Group and petitioned for bike lanes in Davis, California. And that kind of brought about a lot of change and kind of bike lanes across the US. But the question I had was, how can we advocate to build infrastructure to make our cities safer and more conducive for bicyclists? And this is kind of open to everyone as well, besides Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start and other people can jump in. I mean, advocacy is a complicated topic, and there are a lot of different ways that individuals can get involved. Sometimes it's just as simple as trying to engage people you know. I like just going to dinner parties or when I used to go to my kids' sporting events and people know I ride a lot and just talk to people you know and try and communicate in a non-confrontational way of like why things like bike lanes matter and why they're positive to you and why they could be positive to other people. And then beyond that is just like to get involved in your community that just in every city and community that there's like an ongoing process and conversation about how our streets and cities should be set up. And I have like part of what is a theme in the book is just that like there are a lot of people from subcultures in the bike space that used to just not be involved in that at all have gotten involved, and that it might mean going to community meetings or writing letters to people who are decision makers, but to use your voice and to use your own voice to try and make things just a little bit better. But it's like the people who do this for a living, right? There are bike advocates who are on the front lines. They are doing heroic work because it is a grinding process.
Would anyone like to add to that, or? Well, I am going to go ahead with the question that we have in the chat, and it says, have you done any ride the rails trails, and are you concerned about funding for sustainable trails?
Yeah, I have ridden a lot of trails, and I just try and do every kind of riding. I went on a 100-mile ride last Friday that started from my house. And Southern California has these huge networks of trails that run along these like concrete rivers. If you go to the movies or used to go to the movies, you'd see them all over. And there are hundreds of miles of trails, but I have ridden like the rail trails, and somehow for me, and like I like riding through communities. Like I like seeing a variety of like stores and just humans. And so sometimes I prefer that over the trails, but I have done like um, some pretty long trips on rail trails, and I've done gravel riding where or mountain biking where I'm really out in the wilderness, and I think they're all great. And I do think that there right now is a lot of people who just have understandable anxieties about riding on busy streets full of people driving, right? They're aware that everyone's in a huge SUV and a lot of people have phones in their hands, and it can feel a little perilous. So part of, I think, the interest in trails is understandable of folks who just like want to do as much riding as possible where there aren't cars around.
Well, another question that I had, and if anyone has any, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. But women and equity in racing, and was reading in your book, and I guess I just didn't realize that the Tour de France really didn't include women or had a women's race until when was that? Or what year was that? I'm sorry.
Well, it's actually come and gone a couple of times, and that I think it's now about 4 years ago that it restarted, and the attention the last couple of years has been amazing. Where right after, like the men's Tour de France is happening right now, and then right when that ends, there'll be a women's Tour de France, and the quality of competition is as good as it's been in my lifetime. The women still don't have equity, where the men in the Tour de France have a 3-week tour, and the women are considerably have a shorter window than that. But I think that most people who are in the sport or follow it feel like we're in a glass half full rather than glass half empty, where big brands are getting involved as sponsors. It's on TV. A lot of people are watching it. The women who are racing are amazing. There is one story in the book about these 5 women who were track riders in the late 19th century. And maybe a lot of people don't realize that, almost from the time the bicycle was invented, that women have had an interest in racing. And for this like 10-year period, these women were huge celebrities in US popular culture. And then has often been the case that sort of it came down that people started having concerns that like women couldn't handle endurance sports, and they were kind of driven out of competition, which has just been a kind of tension that's been in our culture for a long time. And so the bicycle has often been like this vehicle of emancipation that it's not been an easy road, but right now we're at like a really great moment where just in women's sports in general, I'd say that amazing things are happening, and people on a broad level, whether it's like the WNBA or the Olympics trials in track and field just happened, and this feeling that broadly people realize that women are capable physically of the most amazing things, and this equity that comes from that is happening, and definitely happening in bike racing.
Definitely. And I feel like I was just wanted to kind of throw this out there too. So the big five women, they were, after their kind of popularity, they were banned from racing from 1902 to 1958. And they were pioneers in not only the sport, but also in like the clothing that they were wearing and just the activity. So that was pretty.
It's amazing just that this idea that that you know, and I used to be, in addition to working in cycling, I also used to be an editor at Runner's World, and there was this idea that in the early Olympics, women ran distance races, and then they, again, the same thing happened. They were like, oh, women really shouldn't compete at long distances. Like the women didn't run the marathon in the Olympics till I think the 70s, because there was all these cultural concerns that women couldn't handle it, which is just, in retrospect, just like the dumbest idea. But I guess it's fortunate that we're at a time where people are realizing in a broad way that yeah, women can do anything. And so it's like great to be part of bike culture, being a part of that really obvious realization happening.
Well, thank you for including that in your book, as well as people of color, the LGBTQ community, and other able persons as well. So that was, I really enjoyed reading all of those kind of profiles and that sections. But we do have something in the chat from Reynaldo, and he asked, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges and potential solutions for American cities, communities, families, individuals to make significant change with respect to incorporating riding into our lives and culture?
Yeah, I think that it really happens in a granular way, that you know, yeah, there's so much that, I mean, this is like when I was talking about Paris before, that it's something I'm passionate about and something I'm frustrated about, that I feel like in my lifetime our cities will be transformed. And the frustrating thing is that it's just going to take like way longer than it should take, and that there'll be people that are hurt unnecessarily, and people who don't ride as much as they otherwise would because cities aren't ready. But I see it happening. I travel a lot for my work, and I feel like every time I go to a city, you know, say I go back to the Chicago for the first time in a year, every time I go to a city, I'm like, oh, this is like better than it was a year or two ago. Like the bike share stations push further out into the city. The bike lanes are more numerous and better set up. There's just more people riding to go grocery shopping. It's happening like really slowly. Like again, with a city like Paris, it's like with just strong leadership, they just have totally transformed the city in less than a decade. And the same thing could happen in U.S. cities if we had leadership that was bold enough to go after it. So I suppose that some of that is like on us as a culture, and how we, you know, I don't, I mean, without getting into the weeds of politics, I think that our political culture is really struggling right now to get things done one way or the other, and so much of this is like on legislatures and city councils, judicial entities, to make things safer. But it's like every time a bike lane goes in, or bike share comes to a community, or laws get changed that are realistic to the experience of riding, when there are subsidies offered to get people on e-bikes. These are all things that like move the needle in the right direction. But again, it's like slower than I think many people wish it was.
I agree. I feel like it is a lot slower, and being part of the research branch at CDOT, I was kind of exploring and just looking to see what research has been done about like the benefits of bicycling and bike shares and e-bikes. And it's really just not there yet. And so I feel like, again, not trying to push the research agenda, but as part of research, those are, we do have an open research session where people could submit research problems and then we do fund them. But, that is an option here at CDOT. So if anyone
Yeah.
has any ideas, talk to us about that and we can kind of move forward with that. I did want to just kind of remind everyone we have just about 5 more minutes. And if you have any other questions or comments or,
I see a hand raised.
oh, Bill.
Hey, thank you. So great book. I had a smile the entire time I was reading it, but it was also hard to read because I wanted to put it down and go ride. So thank you. And you made just enough mention here and there about electric bikes, and between maybe your next book and just the overall vibe that I think is out there, I'm really starting to feel like electric bikes are the closest thing we have to a silver bullet for solving our pollution, climate, transportation, public health, mental health problems, and also adding on to the previous two questions about problems getting a new bike lane in. I get a feeling that e-bikes are just going to grow the overall bike tribe by factors of 2 or 3 or more, that we might just have finally enough demand that the crowd of people wanting a bike lane here or there will be way bigger than we've ever had before. And just wanted to get your thoughts on e-bikes in general related to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of e-bikes. I have one that I presently don't ride a ton, but there was a time where it was like my daily driver. I still use it to run errands. I have kind of like a cargo-ish e-bike, and I forget whether Colorado has Trader Joe's or not, but that like our Trader Joe's near where I live is like got this parking lot that's like a bad joke where it's like everyone just sits there waiting for a spot. And it's like maybe a 6-minute drive from my house. And I can ride my e-bike to Trader Joe's. I get there in the same amount of time as it would in a car. There's a rack right by the front door, and I instantly just park my bike by the front door, walk in, and then I get home and I feel like I'm not frustrated. I haven't wasted any time. I got a little fresh air, got a little exercise. That if you live someplace that's hilly or hot, or your job is like a little bit too far, or your school a little bit too far to get to on a conventional bike, you can just like wear jeans and just walk off the bike into a meeting or a class. It does just expand the pool of people who experience how weird and bad our roads can be, and gets more people engaged of wanting infrastructure. There's just almost no negatives. Like within traditional sort of road bike culture, there's like an old trope that people would say that people on e-bikes are cheating, which I just think is like the most stupid BS I've ever heard. Like the people are like driving like an Escalade alone to go get a cup of coffee at Starbucks. It's not cheating to be on an e-bike, and it does just expand the culture. And I like have noticed that Colorado has been more proactive than most states of like on a governmental level of trying to encourage their use. And so I just agree that for a lot of people who would like to drive less, they're a great option. I know a lot of families that maybe were 2-car families where they realized like, oh, with 1 car and an e-bike, we can actually have a life out of this. And so I think they're great.
And those are some great closing words. And also this last slide is amazing. This was the quote that I picked from the book as well. You had a lot of great quotes from other bicyclists as well, but if you're riding a bike, you're doing it right. I love that. That is wonderful. Peter, thank you so much. This has been a really great session. And I also just want to thank the Bike Month Committee. I feel like this was a wonderful kind of some closure to just a great month in general. And as I mentioned before, I just hope we can continue to keep doing what we're doing and learn and create new innovative and solutions to some of the problems that we're having.
It's great to be with you all. I appreciate the conversation.
Yes, thank you. And then I just wanted to add that you can find the book in the CDOT library or here at the Denver Public Library. And you can check out the library's webpage or ask me about how you can find the book. We also have created a LibGuide with some new items from June that also include that as well, and books in the library, bike to work resources. And we will be having another book author series in October, and we're trying to get some final details for that. And we will send out the information, and we will have another speaker as well. So, and a book. I'm really excited to kind of follow up with this really great series that we've kind of started. Thank you everyone for attending, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.